I think the point that Anson makes is a very good one. She's one of the most remarkable people I've ever worked with, and I would be very loath to ever disagree with her. My worry is related to that, which is I wonder what's happened to our sense of honour and our sense of responsibility, particularly in Britain. It's above all a British question. We signed the joint declaration with China. It's a treaty at the UN. It's supposed to commit us to standing up for Hong Kong's rights until 2047. You don't get much sense of British governments actually standing over those promises and obligations, and I think that's a great pity. And it's all for derisory, ludicrous reasons. The argument, which is, I suspect, going to be tested quite a bit in the next few months, the argument that the only way you can do trade with China is by kowtowing to China on political issues, is drivel. It's complete nonsense.
You once called it the unshakable destiny of Hong Kong people to run Hong Kong. Yeah. Does it still feel unshakable to you?
Yes, because I think at the end of the day, that is exactly what will happen. I think the values, the attributes which make Hong Kong special are going to last. I think that communism, whatever that is, sort of Leninism with capitalist characteristics, is not a long runner. I think the rule of law, I think freedom of speech, I think freedom of worship, I think all the freedoms you associate with a plural society are long-term winners, not just everywhere else in the world, but in Asia as well.
So is Aung San Chan going too far when she says you put your signature to the joint declaration, you hand over 7 million people to what is still a totalitarian state on the basis of these promises? The British government isn't being brave enough to stand up.
Well, I think the British government would be well advised to prove her wrong, because I think it would be dishonourable not to do so. I worry about that. I worry about that point. I worry about now people are prepared to sell our honour for alleged trade deals which never actually happen. I think that would be calamitous. And what do we represent in the world if that's what happens? In what sense would the next generation of leaders in Hong Kong, who will be sooner or later democratically chosen, in what sense would they feel any special relationship to the United Kingdom if that's how we behave? Look, I feel very strongly that we let down the parents of this generation of democracy activists. I think it would be a tragedy if we let down these kids as well.
What did you mean by that?
I meant by the last 10 or 15 years of British responsibility in Hong Kong. I think we should have done more to bed down democracy. We did a certain amount, but I don't think we did enough. And I think if Hong Kong had had another 5 or 10 years experience of democracy, it would have been much more difficult for the Chinese authorities to have rolled it back, as they have done. We're now almost 20 years since the handover, and we're still arguing about whether or not, in effect, Beijing should decide who runs Hong Kong, or whether the people of Hong Kong should decide. Look, I feel very strongly that we let down the parents of this generation of democracy activists. I think it would be a tragedy if we let down these kids as well.
What did you mean by that?
I meant by the last 10 or 15 years of British responsibility in Hong Kong. I think we should have done more to bed down democracy. We did a certain amount, but I don't think we did enough. And I think if Hong Kong had had another 5 or 10 years experience of democracy, it would have been much more difficult for the Chinese authorities to have rolled it back, as they have done. We're now almost 20 years since the handover, and we're still arguing about whether or not, in effect, Beijing should decide who runs Hong Kong, or whether the people of Hong Kong